Okay, I think we're at about 50% filled now. That's amazing. I'm going to start the session today with an opening prayer. I acknowledge that I'm not an elder or a knowledge holder, but I am a spiritual person that believes in Creator and prayer. And I just want to share a few words. I acknowledge that I am from Minnegozi Pine Creek First Nation, which is Treaty 2 and 4 territory in Manitoba, but I currently reside in the homeland of the Dakota peoples. If you do not believe in prayer, then I just encourage you to be respectful of others' beliefs, as prayers help strengthen and guide us and start us off in a good way for our event today. Creator, great grandmother and grandfather, we thank you for this beautiful day and for the water, for the rocks, for the trees, for the fire, for the air. We thank you for the winged ones and the four-legged creatures and those that slither in the ground and crawl on the ground, as we all have a purpose, Creator. We all have a purpose, including everything, and we have a responsibility to help take care of everything that surrounds us. And I wanted to share a special prayer and a moment of reflection for all those people that are suffering from forest fires right now, that are dealing with displacement and sadness and disparity. And I want us to think of them as we have our discussions today, as largely our themes on climate change and adaptation and resiliency are stemming from extreme weather events and the need for more Indigenous knowledge and cooperation. So I ask for all the attendees to be respectful of each other's questions and opinions, and for each of the panelists to give space to one another to have your voice heard in a good way. Fire is really important for regeneration for the soil, but too much can be a bad thing. Fire gives us regrowth and regeneration, and we've been doing fire management for time immemorial. But I just wanted to start by singing a water song to help cool off those that are feeling the heat and the impacts of forest fire, and may it help comfort you. And as this song goes, it's called Wishita. And if you know it, sing along. And as I'm singing, I just wanted you to reflect on thinking that you're in a canoe going down a river, and then the river starts off slow and you're enjoying your time in the canoe. But then the rapids start to pick up and your speed starts to pick up and you're turning the bend and just having that time. So I invite you to just close your eyes and think about being in that canoe. That is how this song was shared to me and the story behind it. Wishita do ya, wishita do ya, hey. Wishita do ya, wishita do ya, hey. Wishata naya, hey, hey, wishata naya, hey, hey. Wishata naya, hey, hey, wishata naya, hey, hey. Wishita do ya, So I hope you all felt like you were in a canoe, because that was the experience that I was hoping to leave with you. So a little bit about my organization, the Center for Indigenous Environmental Resources, is that we're a national First Nation directed environmental nonprofit charitable organization. We've been around for 27 plus years, and our purpose is to help support Indigenous communities and organizations in the environmental problems that they may face by helping them achieve the resources that they need to help build their environmental capacity. And I also want to acknowledge Carlin Allery, so a biodiversity associate. Please share your video so people can see you and give a wave. Carlin is a member of the Manitoba Métis Federation and has worked tirelessly and many long hours on this project, helping support the research team. Several members of the Climate Institute are here today. Maria Shallard and Janina Stajich, who helped coordinate the program alongside of SEER. Engagement support was provided by Dean Evangelo and mentors Dylan Clark, Ricardo Pillay, Sarah Miller, Jana Well, Dave Mitchell. Please all show yourselves on camera, because without your endless support and time reviewing case studies and helping find resources that would help really improve the impact of the case studies for the researchers. I especially want to thank the panelists, Randy Carpenter, Emily Dicken, Casey Gabriel, Sandra Lamouche, Sherry License, Patrick Mitchell, and Lilia Magulova for sharing their time and energy today, as well as working so hard and putting so much love and so much passion into their work over the past few months. I also would like to acknowledge Preparing Our Home for their support for this case study, an organization that empowers Indigenous youth to become emergency preparedness leaders in their communities. We will hear more of an introduction from the panelists following this introduction and welcoming by President Rick Smith from the Canadian Climate Institute.
Thanks so much, Cheyenne, and thank you for starting this event in such a fantastic way. Hi, everyone. As Cheyenne says, I'm Rick Smith, and I'm zooming in today from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And I want to join Cheyenne in thanking everyone for attending. We're just delighted with the interest in this event, just delighted in the quality of the work you're about to hear. As some of you will know, the Canadian Climate Institute is Canada's leading climate policy research organization. We've got staff right across the country. And our institute is committed to ensuring that our work supports Indigenous self-determination and that Indigenous ways of knowing and being and doing are reflected in policy recommendations. We recognize that this work must be led by and for Indigenous people. And our hope, our simple hope, is that this series helps to amplify Indigenous voices, research, and ideas in order to strengthen the impact and the effectiveness of climate policy recommendations moving forward. Just a couple of words about how we got here today. This series is in its third year, and I'm very proud to say. And it came to be when recognizing that there's a gap in Indigenous-led research in Canada. We started working early in our partnership with SEER, and we co-developed this program together. And we thought, in putting this together, we thought the best way to recognize this gap is through storytelling, is through showcasing Indigenous-led research, not just by individual researchers, but as you're about to hear, by communities who are leaders on climate initiatives right across the country. Internally at our institute, we are always working to listen, to learn, to strengthen how we support this work. And I am really excited to tell you that we've just formed a new Indigenous partnership and research program under the leadership of the fantastic Maria Shallard, aided and abetted by the great Jana Whale. That unit is going to be highlighting future case studies, digging deeper in terms of Indigenous-led research. We've got some really exciting plans ahead that we hope means that we get to work with even more important partners and stakeholders and rights holders right across the country. So once again, just wanted to say, join Cheyenne in welcoming you and thanking you for taking some time in your busy day to join us. You are not going to be disappointed in terms of the program. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back to your very able host, Cheyenne.
Thank you, Rick. Before we begin, just some housekeeping, that we'll be asking questions after each author has shared their case study. We will welcome and encourage respectful questions from the audience as well. There will be dedicated time for live question and answers at the end of the discussion. We encourage you to type your questions into the chat box. And this event will be recorded, or is being recorded, and the event will be shared with all registered participants. Last year, I believe the event was also posted on YouTube channel. So we're going to begin by having each panel member tell us a story from their case study. And I'd like to open up with Sandra. You unmute yourself, Sandra.
Tansa Sandra Lamush Natsigasun Nia Nihiao Isqueo. I'm registered with the Big Stone Cree Nation, my mom's community, and my dad is from Capoeino, and he is a storyteller who shared some of the traditional Cree stories with me. Under the Indian Act, we're not allowed to register. We could only register with one of our parents' communities, part of like the continued assimilation process. But yeah, I give thanks to both of those communities. So my case study is about storytelling, and I've been doing storytelling and dance for almost 2 decades, and actually before that. And my master's thesis was on Indigenous dance and wellness. And so I looked at a holistic perspective using the medicine wheel. And one of the things that came out of this was how important stories were for changing people's behaviors. And so a lot of the dancers would say, this story led me to this action. And so it's really changing people's lives and transforming their physical behavior. And like for me, that included sobriety and different actions of taking physical health. And for me, it's also being involved with connecting to the environment, spirituality, emotional wellness, and working on that as well, mental health, and continuing that process of living a good life in balance and always trying to learn and grow. Nitonak mio pimadaswin, so seeking the good life, learning, growing, being. And I wanted to use this this idea of holistic understanding and stories as powerful tools to change people and behavior, and put it in terms of climate change and using some of those same stories. And during COVID, one of the things that my family did was collect some of these stories, and we wrote some of them down. And then my dad said, I told him I wanted to learn them and use them. And so he said, just like, do whatever you want to with the stories. And so I'm just starting to get into it. I feel like really like a big responsibility with them. And so I don't want to just like jump into it. But yeah, I wanted to know also, why are Indigenous stories excluded? And working in reconciliation and education for the last 10 years, I saw there was this hesitancy to incorporate Indigenous knowledge in a lot of areas. And part of that was people's worry about how to speak about these things. And so part of that led me into some of the anti-racism work, because some of the examples of racism are exclusion, right? And it's right in the TRC. They talk about the reason that our education system uses Western knowledge is because it is thought to be superior. And so this has infiltrated into all other areas, academics, research, and that's including climate change actions and research and policies at all levels. And so that's why I wanted to take this anti-racist lens and look at maybe how people are not valuing Indigenous stories as much as I think they should, and how important it is, and looking at some of the research that also supports this. So that's basically a summary of some of the case study that I worked on.
Sorry, I'm just trying to, am I unmuted now? Okay, Sandra, I just wanted to, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. I just wanted to, if you can elaborate a bit more on the importance of anti-Indigenous racism training and how story can inform the training.
So when you look at lots of well, I shouldn't say a lot, but I've looked at quite a few anti-racism reports and research, and two of the things that commonly come out is the unequal penalties and the unequal privileges that are seen amongst different races of people, right? And so what this means is, like, for certain people, the penalties will be greater. And we see this in climate change, that Indigenous people, we even see this like in Alberta currently, that Indigenous people are suffering or dealing with most of the forest fires, right? So it's affecting Indigenous communities more so than non-Indigenous communities. So the penalties we see, but when I think of it, I also think of like when Indigenous people are maybe speaking up or have actions against maybe a pipeline or maybe deforestation, but they are over penalized or over policed in terms of like for protesters and for anybody speaking out. And so that's one of the ways that we see the penalties being unequal. And then the other aspect is the privilege, the unequal privilege. And so the way that I see it is that Indigenous voices in climate change policies are seen as, are not as prevalent as they need to be, and in terms of how effective Indigenous practices have been for centuries, and the knowledge that is continually being proven to be effective and efficient comparative to like capitalist Western ways of doing things. So one of the quotes that I used is from Braiding Sweetgrass, and she talks about how Indigenous stories are often seen as part of the past, and they're actually instructions for the future. And so that's one of the ways that this like racist stereotypes of Indigenous people as only being uncivilized and part of the past are impacting how we are using Indigenous stories today, and not using them as fighting climate change into the future, as her quote suggests. So that's just one example. Another example that I used was how a lot of storytellers that I've heard, they would talk about animals as the turtle, or the bird did this, the bird that, instead of using a turtle or a bird. And there's a very subtle difference. I had to look up, I was curious why this is, but is referring to like an individual animal, and the is to be understood more generally, a generalized term. And so it's like connected to the animal as a whole, as part of a whole, or as part of a species, right? Or personally, how I would say is like the spirit of that animal, right? As part of like this greater entity. And my worry is that people will listen to the storytellers, and if they don't have an anti-racist understanding, they might think that that storyteller is not using proper English and might make an assumption that they are not as intelligent, right? And which is part of anti-Indigenous racism, this idea around intellect and not being as smart. And so that's why I think another reason that the anti-racism is really important.
Thank you, Sandra. We have time for one more question. What do you think is needed to ensure Indigenous stories and Indigenous knowledge is included when policies related to climate change are being designed or discussed?
Well, I think that part of the problem that I see is that Western science and Western ways are not holistic. So a lot of the Western education is very focused on different forms of knowledge, like the written word and physical testable knowledge. And so it's very like, it doesn't include, like, for example, our cultures are spiritual, they're emotional, they're about interrelatedness, right? And I feel like that Indigenous knowledge is a better container for policies because Western could easily fit in, but when you just have the Western, it doesn't have space for Indigenous knowledge. And it doesn't have those other aspects of knowledge that we have in our languages and our practices. There's way more besides just in our mind. Because I'm a dancer too, I've been doing a lot on knowledge held within our body, this idea of blood memory, sensory knowledge, right? So there's other ways to think and gain knowledge that are beyond the capacity of Western systems and Western knowledge. So yeah, so I personally think that Indigenous ways should be the starting point, and then the Western knowledge comes into that because it fits better that way rather than trying to like put a what do they say, a square peg in a round hole, right? And so I feel like that's a huge struggle that I've seen, and I struggle with myself, like I've experienced.
Thank you, Sandra, very much. We're going to move on to our second case study. So I'd like to invite Sherry, Randy, and Emily to speak about their case study at this time and introduce yourselves.
Hello, that's Randy Carpenter, Hillsick Nation. I'm the emergency coordinator here in Bella Bella. My case study is how climate change has affected my community. When I grew up as a young man, from 15 to 30, I was a commercial fisherman. And in our community, we had 40 commercial seine boats and 60 commercial gill netters. And we do have a processing fish plant in our community. And at that time, it probably employed anywhere from 75 to 110 people. And we thrived on harvesting salmon. It was our main employment in our community. And I know over the years we have a big system here in Spiller Channel. And in the 80s, there used to be 70,000 chum salmon returning to that system. And 2 years ago, there's 4,000 salmon that returned. So we are seeing, we know that our river systems, when it goes 18 degrees or higher, it's affecting the salmon stocks. It's the fry can't survive in there. So we do have 2 hatcheries in our community. We have one right in our community, and we have one 14 miles away in Briggs Inlet. And in the last 5 years, the numbers have declined. I would say we are at extinction levels now with our wild salmon stocks in our area. And our community doesn't thrive on it anymore. The young men here don't grow up wanting to be commercial fishermen because they don't even know what commercial fishermen are anymore, like the way it was when I was a young man. Yeah, so one thing I would like to see is like to see the province, I guess, and the federal government kind of look into other fisheries, create other fisheries on the coast where all the reserves on the coast are ocean-going people. We've always lived, harvested from the ocean. There's a saying here is when the tide goes down, the table is set. And yeah, I'd like to see like what the Americans are doing up in Alaska. They're thriving, and their river systems their wild river stocks are weak like ours, but they've been thriving since the mid 70s on ocean ranching. Yeah, and there's other ways of where we can build our economy back. We can look at kelp harvesting, trout fishing. There's other ways. Like I said, we are people. We're people from the ocean. We fill our freezers from the ocean, and we have to revitalize that.
Thank you, Randy. Also, Randy, can you please share your video? Some folks are wanting to see your handsome face.
Okay, I was just we don't have very good internet in Bella Bella. Let's
Thank you, Randy. And we'll go into another member of your team for their introduction.
White Hawaii Sherry license request. I come to you from Secwepemcúlecw. I'm in Kamloops right now. I am the former fire chief for Adams Lake Indian Band, and we, with the heat dome that we had, our area, we lost a lot of our berries that year. We lost a lot of food sources, and I guess I had said at one point that like when we went out, we could actually smell the trees, like hot pine on a stove. So that whole summer we went straight from flooding to the heat dome to fires. And my thought is that we need to actually be going back to the people and speaking to them, because we know the area. Our rights to culturally burn have been taken away. We have to be mandated by other people, and we knew how to control things. before. And we shouldn't have to ask permission to protect our own land. That's my thought. No, our food sources, when we lose the berries for a year, it doesn't just affect us for a year, it affects us for an extended period of time. When we lose the salmon that year because the water was too warm, it's not just that year that they're gone for, they come in the 4-year cycle. Well, that's in 4 years, that's another depleted resource. And we count on the berries, we count on the food. If anybody has an interest in protecting the land or protecting the environment, it's us, because this is our life source.
Thank you, Sherry. Go to Emily.
Perfect. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name's Emily Dicken. I come from the Little Red River Cree Nation on my father's side and mixed British descent on my mother's side. And it was an absolute privilege to be able to walk alongside and learn from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation in this case study, but most specifically from Andrea Alec, who's the health director, and who really took the time to unpack the cultural elements, the health-based elements, and the intrinsic relationship between the land and water that's held within Tsleil-Waututh culture, and where she's seen such dramatic changes, not just from the heat dome, but from prolonged elements of heat throughout the community. And what resonated with me most when I really worked to unpack this case study with Andrea was really kind of looking at 3 core areas that she brought forward through her expertise and sharing. And it was really the impact on the land and water, but the culturally protected elements of recognizing that these impacts are happening, but there are culturally protective mechanisms that Tsleil-Waututh is engaging in that are working to offset what these impacts look like to the community. And when we started to think about, and she shared with me the impacts on the land and water and the impacts on the foreshore, she talked about the protective elements of planting eelgrass. And it wasn't just the mechanism of planting a native species into the foreshore environment, but it was about the cultural learning that happens through that process within the community, and the fact that it was a process that brings the community together. It brings the community together in dialogue in terms of what's going on in the community with regards to the rapid changes that are happening from extreme heat, but how through cultural knowledge, learnings, and teaching, there are ways that mitigation is happening and the protective spaces are underway. And it was really a way for her to think about how to offset these impacts from the value of bringing her lens of health into the protective mechanisms and culture into those protective mechanisms. And throughout this case study, we then transitioned into the space of understanding the impacts on food security and sovereignty within this, and recognizing that although the heat dome impacts in 2021 were really significant and severe, we have to expect that these will be impacts that we'll face in the future. And for Andrea, she recognized that in her role as health director, this needs to be part of her ongoing long-term and strategic planning. And although that's a space of, this is a great space of technical work that she's leaning into as the health director, she's bringing perspectives around cultural food growth and thinking about a 5-year strategic plan in terms of food sustainability and food production at the community level, and recognizing that that needs to be thought of when she's really in that space of awareness that this was one of many heat events that are gonna impact the community. And perhaps the last piece that I want to bring forward from the case study was one of the most important pieces that we talked about, and it's a piece that, you know, was reflected in all of the case studies that were brought forward. And it's really this protective measure of culture in the community, and the heart of that culture sitting with the care of elders, recognizing that we want to always keep elders and community members in community where possible, but sometimes it's not always possible to make that happen, especially when houses aren't designed to hold, or they're holding excessive heat in dangerous ways, and there aren't mechanisms to cool those spaces. What Andrea recognized as a health director, she needed to work with the community to understand what elders needed to feel comfortable if they needed to go and seek cooler conditions outside of the community. So making sure that those protective measures were in place and that elders had what they needed to feel safe, to be in a safer place. And for her, that meant elders being able to take a companion or a caregiver with them if they had to go and seek those cooler times. And I know this is just such a brief snapshot of such a beautiful dialogue, but I raise my hands to the work that Andrea brought forward into this space, and to the work that Sherry and Randy brought forward as well. So I think we're going to turn it over to Lily now.
Hi, Cheyenne. I think I'm supposed to talk about the relational aspects of the research.
Well, you could do a little bit of an introduction, and
Yes.
then we could talk about the relational aspects.
Thank you. Well, Hamuhogas, Minimissimum Lilia. Hello, everyone. My name is Lilia. I come from Bashkir people of the Ural Mountains, and I'm joining today from the traditional unceded territory of the Sinaics. The Sinaics were declared extinct under the Indian Act, but Elder Marilyn James is still here and reclaiming her right to be here. This was a very emotional experience, this case study, and what we wrote up in the end is just a tiny little snippet of the experiences that the community went through. The process itself was very intimate. People let us in their homes. So we had sharing circles, and sharing circles are fundamentally different from interviews or focus groups in that they focus on how the participants felt and experienced the extreme heat event at a time. We heard about how people were in their homes, as Casey shared. They were in the home at night and they felt like they were playing sports, right? Like just sitting. We heard about the health conditions that people's parents experienced. We heard about Indigenous stoicism and inability to ask for help due to racism and issues that Sandra talked about. But I guess the biggest sense that we got out of this research is like, as Cheyenne beautifully opened, we have turned the bend on extreme events. This was a terrifying threshold. The rapids are much faster. The canoe that the families and the communities paddled in, as Emily said, they prioritized elders first. How are our elders first at all costs? There were very different measures between rural, remote, and urban communities. In urban communities, people could leverage existing resources around them. In Randy's communities at the time, there were no buildings with air conditioning because just these temperatures are unheard of. We also heard about the incredible protective nature of culture, as Emily talked about, but we also heard about the lack of action at the higher levels. So while community put everything in place to protect the elders and the members, and we've actually seen disproportionate positive outcomes of the heat event in Indigenous communities, a lot of work remains at the other scales that needs to be done still. And I see from the incredible attendance today, a lot of people in this room are part of the solution, and we need to do a lot better on ensuring safer outcomes. And as Sherry said, the heat dome was just but one event in a sequence of long events. So another way of bringing that relational approach is not just paying attention to what you're interested in, but really paying attention to what's important to people. And one of the most profound things I think that came out of the sharing circles, we had 4 of them, and we had a number of people attend, was the embodied fear. When Sandra was talking about what we carry in our bodies, it was that fear of what the future may hold. And when the wind picks up, when the temperatures go up, when it starts raining. So I think there is a lot of work to be done, but there was also a lot of hope in this space. And with that, I will pass it on to the next case study.
Actually, we have some time. I'd like to hear from Casey Gabriel and some perspectives.
Excuse me. Good morning, everybody. My name is Casey Gabriel. I am coming to you from my homeland in Mount Currie, BC, also known as Lillooet Nation. In the part of the case study that I did, I talked about how our elders and our youth were impacted and what we did as a community to help them get through the heat wave, how to cope and everything with what they're dealing with. We have a local health center here, and what they did was provide some air conditioners or for the elders. But the thing is, they only had about 6 to 8 available, and we have many elders. Like we have, I would hazard a guess at about 30 elders with homes with no air conditioners or no air circulation. So that was very hard for them to manage. And as for the youth, they were like, we have a youth center here. I had formerly worked there, and there it's a brand new building, no air conditioning, it's just a recirculating air system. So the youth would go there, and all we'd have to do is open the windows and just let that warm air go through, and that was as cool as it would get during the day. So one thing another thing our nation did for the elders was to provide cooling stations for not only the elders, but the people who didn't have air conditioners in their homes. But the problem with that was the cooling stations were only open and available during work hours of the people or the managers who would run the buildings where these said cooling stations were. So that was another problem. A little bit on that was transportation for the elders. We do have an elders van that was available, but at the time of COVID and everything that was going on, there'd only be allowed the driver. And if they were in the same household, 1 or 2 people on that bus, then that they'd get dropped off. Bus would be clean and the van would go and get more people. So that was one of the challenges we had with the cooling stations.
Thank you, Casey, for those perspectives. I have about 3 minutes for this section, Lily. I was going to ask if you can emphasize on some of the policies that supporting heat adaptation of recommendations that you could make.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Cheyenne. So there are a number of things, as Patrick Michel powerfully said, give people the truth if you want them to adapt. So one thing that to begin with is really site-specific data. What we saw that experiences in the 3 communities that we looked at were vastly different based on the water bodies, based on the canyon shape. We kind of talk about urban heat island effect, but we don't talk about embodied heat in the natural spaces. Other things like traditional coping mechanisms, nature's cooling centers like lakes, rivers, the water was very warm. I still remember how Sherry was saying the very cool area in the lake that they normally go to was bath water, right? And the other big thing is, I guess, impacts on the non-human life, which I think was one of the strongest things that came forward in the Sherry, in what Sherry and Emily and Randy shared as well. How do we ensure so much of the heat action is focused on saving human lives? But what do we do to protect ecosystems? And at that point, the title of our case study is Community is the Solution. But if we talk about ecosystems, we have to act beyond the community. We have to do planning for extreme heat at watershed level. we have to have the right incentives, and we have to streamline provincial and federal planning. So those are just some of the things that came out through the study. And I just really want to thank our absolute stellar team of people that showed up for this day after day. We met on weekends, evenings. Everybody has extremely busy schedules. So thank you so much, our amazing team, for this experience.
Thank you, Lily, to you and your team for bringing this case study. If you have, for our audience, if you have questions on the case study, please put them in the chat box, as well as there'll be a link to the case study itself to review in more detail and check out some photos. Our next case study was presented to us by Patrick. So I'd like to invite Patrick at this time to introduce yourself and tell us about your case study.
Cookstabe Cookpee, Cookstabe Sear and CCI, Cookstabe Schnuck Cookpee Kanai Hans Quest, Intlakatmuch Klaklepton. So by opening up in my language, I'm directly saying and indirectly saying we're still here. The Indigenous people of Canada survived contact and colonization, and we're still here. Our language, our culture, our history, our laws, our jurisdictions, everything survived contact and colonization. We just need to remember that. I opened up by thanking the creator for this day. Of course, I thank the event organizers for putting this together. And most importantly, I thanked all of you for listening in. And for those people who are going to access the papers, perhaps they did some homework before, maybe they're reading it now, or maybe they'll share this recording later. Thank you. The Creator gave us all gifts of life and choice, and I'm thanking you for your choice to share your time with me today. And that's really important. I'm from Linton. I think that says it all. Linton in 2021 experienced extreme heat, wind, rain, and cold. 4 compounding extreme weather events in the same 12 months. And yeah, I'm still smiling. I wear a tie, which I call the eternal flame of optimism. My optimism is that we're going to be okay. When you collaborate for a common cause, it's amazing what you can do. And when you're given a clean slate, what will you do? So my paper, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. Linton's given a clean slate. What are we going to do? Well, I thought I'd break it down in a paper. Says, well, damn, Linton was hot. How did I know? We had weather stations. Minister of Environment federally said that Linton hit 49.6, and he was right, but he was also wrong. The actual Linton weather stations were recording temperatures between 53 and 55 degrees. How do you design a climate change transition adaptation plan? You need site-specific data. How hot is it? How windy is it? How much rain you're getting? How much cold are you getting? How much snow are you getting? Because that has impacts. There's geoclimatic impacts, and those geoclimatic impacts are on your land and resources, but also the infrastructure and systems that you use to live. And when we look at this, so at my home community of Kanakabar, we have 3 weather stations. They're at 3 separate elevations, and they record separate temperature, wind, rain, snow. And so we've designed an entire community transition plan based on site-specific data, not data from an hour and a half south in Chilliwack, certainly not data from 2 hours north of Kamloops, and certainly not data from the Vancouver airport. If you're going to have a climate change adaptation plan, have site-specific data. That's chapter 1 of my paper. Chapter 2, given an opportunity to do something, we had to start explaining. So if you look at the title of the paper, and I don't remember it off the top of my head, I don't have it open, but I believe the paper is about foundations of life. Without water, there is no life. Okay. What is water? Water is necessary for ecosystem health, for drinking, for irrigation, for fire protection, for energy production, and potentially, and most importantly, having water available for regions who don't have any. 6 reasons. What is your family water plan? What is your community's water plan? What is your municipality's water plan? What is your regional plan? Hey, I'm from British Columbia. Do we have a British Columbia plan? And of course, Canadians, how you doing? And I mention those 5 entities because that's 5 separate groups, 5 separate governments, all sitting in different canoes, pointing in different directions, going, tipping over, flopping over. So how do we sit down there and collaborate on a common cause if we're all in a wrong boat? 5 governments. How do you bring 5 governments together? Easy peasy lemon squeezy. You put up a buffet or you'll have rice for door prizes. That'll get the natives out, just so you know, door prizes for rice. What is your water plan? Look at how I wrote it in the plan, because without water, how can you have a life and a lifestyle? So a critical part of a foundation is, do we have enough water? My daughter said to me before the fire, the issue facing Canadians isn't water quantity, it's water storage. So I hope that you understand that section of the paper. Now that you have water and now that you have, well, weather, how's your food? I told you about rice. Well, what happens if the roads are washed out caused by an atmospheric river? We won't have rice at Linton. Well, sorry, we had a fire that burnt down all the stores. We don't have rice at Linton already. So we've already adapted to less rice in our diet. Food. When during an emergency, first thing that seems to happen is, do we have water? Do we have food? And I was listening to the radio yesterday about the people trapped in Port Alberni caused by a fire, and of course the food shortages that causes. I'm thinking about all the people who are evacuated and sent to emergency operations centers, be they hockey arenas or hotel rooms. Food, water. So when we talk about foundations, air, there's not a lot we can do about, but except understand it, because air is basically determining the weather. And in my paper, I said the world's air, water, and land are heating up at an unprecedented rate, triggering these geoclimatic events that are wiping out our systems. We can't grow wheat in a desert. We can't raise cows in a floodplain. So my paper talks about really focusing and grinding down on food. What is this food? Do we need food to live? Absolutely. Don't expect California to send up the food if they're burning, if they're under an earthquake, if the roads are wiped out, the trains are wiped out, and there's no more planes. So we need to figure out a way to raise their own meats, fruits, and vegetables so that's both sustainable and resilient. So my paper talks about that. Now, shelter. I'm from Linton and my house lasted the longest. I did everything I could to protect my home from the wildfire, but at the end of the day, the substandard material used in construction eventually caught on fire. I found a fireproof material, and we'll get into that another day. As you look at your shelter, and we've heard what happens, and we have substandard homes. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Nobody's built a good home. Last week, I took 40 archaeologists and anthropologists, and it was about 40 degrees out, and I took them into our original indigenous home called a Dicken. Also, you would know it as a pit house. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they had to bring blankets in because it was cold. We buried our homes under the ground and put 4 feet of dirt over top. That kept the extreme heat or just a regular heat out. And in the winter, it kept out the cold or extreme cold out. And yet we were told through contact, we need to live in 2x4 huts above ground that eventually become death traps. Shelter. How then do we make this transition? And I'm sitting there, my timer keeps shutting off. So I'm at 8 minutes and I was given 10. I want to transition then into the conclusion of my paper. My paper was not designed to perpetuate the same stupidity that you can get. For example, a CBC headline said, Ottawa fiddles while Canada burns. That kind of got me pissed off. Where's the good news stories? I'm from Linton and I'm still smiling and I still believe. That is my grandson's shirt up there. And I've sent Janina a picture that I wanted to share with Mike. My paper ends with, we know what to do, you just need to do it. Our biggest challenge is learning to unlearn learned behavior. Indigenous people survived thousands of years without Ottawa and Victoria, and now it seems like we're stuck. Well, the answer is getting the 5 governments together in the same place at the same time. It's nonpartisan. Climate change, transition, and adaptation is nonpartisan. The resources exist: people, time, technology, money, and information. Pool it, share it. Build regional water plants. Build regional, resilient, sustainable food systems. Redesign our homes. If you're going to build a new home, build a home that'll last the next 100 years, that is resilient to heat, wind, rain, and cold, that are energy efficient and that are affordable. The solutions exist. We just need to start doing it. So I'll end before Cheyenne digitally kicks me under the computer or does this by saying, look at the last sentence. If you need a why, the who, what, where, when, and how much, that's easy. Why? And the answer is our children and grandchildren are worth it. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. The question that I have for you is, what do you mean when you say hope flows from action at the end of your case study?
I'll try to be nice.
Be nice.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So, you know what? We've heard a lot of talk, right? We've known since 1988 about global warming. And what we did to 1988, we did unknowingly. And then now it's 2023. And we're going to blow past 1.5. What we did since 1988 was basically doubled our GHG emissions knowingly. So we talk a lot. Geez, next they're going to say there's a COP28 coming up. Does that mean there were 27 other times we got together and said, hey, we should do something? Right? I don't know how many times the IPCC needs to give you another report saying bad things are happening, you should get ready for it. And getting ready for something actually means doing something. Seriously. I've heard people talk about the impacts growing in frequency, duration, intensity. If you're going to get ready for something, get ready for it. Don't talk about it. Prioritize your needs, your family needs, your individual needs. Make it happen. If you don't have the money, find a way to find that money. And it does happen. You can make it happen. My community built $1 million water system without any third-party support. And as a result, my children and grandchildren know for the next 100 years, we'll always have water regardless of the weather. Hope flows from action. Don't talk about a water plan, build water resiliency. Don't talk or don't sit down there and be afraid of food shortages. Everything you need, you can grow. Everything you need, you've had in the same place we've been living at for thousands of years. It's still there. It survived contact. It survived colonization, as did we. We just need to remember how to live in many ways, the old ways, but we have the tools and capability today. Hope flows from action. How do we sit there and live in a world that is afraid of tomorrow? How about living in a world where the tomorrow doesn't matter? When you invest in your future today, what you do today determines your future. So make the investments today and you will be okay tomorrow, but you need to do that today. And now my paper just talks about then focus on water, food, shelter. With foundations, the rest takes care of itself. You don't need to be scared of tomorrow. I'm asking everybody, embrace your uncertainty because our future is not predetermined when it's what you do today. And when we pool our resources, good things are going to happen. And I believe that deep down to my core, and I'll believe it till the day I leave this earth. So I hope that answers your question, Cheyenne. Probably not the way you wanted it, but.
Oh, I feel inspired, and sometimes truth creates the greatest inspiration. So thank you very much for sharing those insights. We're going to move into our live Q&A portion of the question. So if you didn't get a chance to put your question into the Q&A, please do so. We're going by whatever shows up on my Google sheet. So I will start with a general question. So if a panelist wants to answer the question, please unmute yourself and say, I'll answer this one. The first question, what does effective engagement on climate issues look like between municipalities and Indigenous people? For example, what about an Indigenous citizens assembly so that voices outside organized governance structures can be heard? Who wants to take that one on?
I'll say a few words right off the bat. I don't see jurisdictions. I see brothers and sisters taking on this with the same gift, life and choice. First Nations municipalities working together happen. But they need to happen because we're neighbors, we're friends, we're family. As Lily said, it's community. What I'm challenged with is why people don't go to meetings, why people don't respond to engagement. Have we learned to keep our mouth shut? That we're scared that somebody will think indifferent of it or think less of us? Trust me, I go to every meeting and I have no problems saying what I think. So I'm just saying is engagement works because you need to. When you have a why, a common cause of why, people will come to the meetings and then they want to be kept informed of the progress. And that's what we did at Kanakabar, and that's what Linton is doing now, is the engagement is through the roof and it's starting to build in momentum. We're going to start building this summer. I know it. So I hope that answers a little bit.
Thank you, Patrick. I also see Sherry has her hands up. Also, all panelists, can you please put your videos on for the Q&A session? Miigwech.
One of the things I think really needs to be done, like Patrick said, is go right to the people. We have to stop going to band offices and chief and council because they're the ones making decisions. But at the same time, me personally, I'm not going to go to every band meeting because of, you know, dynamics within our community. We need to talk to the people that are on the land. We need to talk to the berry pickers. We need to talk to the wildland firefighters. We need to talk to the people that are gathering the medicine. It can't just be at the band office. These are some of the same people that have led us into the into damaged relationships, right? So I don't have a good answer for it other than go to the people.
I would agree with that completely.
And another thing, sorry, one more thing I want to make a point about too, is that there's a lot of Indigenous agencies, I guess you could call them, that have a lot of non-native people working there. So there's tons of money that's out there for Indigenous, emergency preparedness. But there's a lot of non-native people that are working in those agencies that are making the decisions, and it's not necessarily Indigenous people that are making the decisions there that need to be.
That's completely true. I just want to move on to, so I have a question specific for Sandra. I was listening to an Alaska Native podcast recently that mentioned the Western understanding of stories as cute or quaint, when Indigenous stories really represent our worldview and original instructions. Should we use a word other than stories to convey this importance? Or how would you suggest communicating about our stories across cultural divides?
Yeah, that's a good question, because is it the word that needs to change, or is it how we think of stories that needs to change? I don't have a preference, but I know, like in the Native Science book, Gregory Kahate, he talks about our creation stories, traditional stories, as having both fact and metaphor in them. And this is something that I really picked up in one of the stories my dad told, is like why the beaver has a flat tail. And I got curious, so I researched it, and it turned out that like 10,000 years ago, there was giant beavers, and they had round tails, and around that time they became flat. Like there's archaeological evidence. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it's the word that's the problem, or is it how we think about a story, and is it just like the Western view of stories that's the problem? So I don't have an answer, and that's just what I'm gonna say.
Thank you, Sandra. I know I'm moving along these pretty quickly, but there's some amazing questions that I just want to get to. So this next one, what would be the most impactful action municipalities can do immediately to decolonize Indigenous policy and create opportunities for Indigenous community to practice cultural knowledge and ways of life in the context of climate change and ecological decline? What can local organizations do to support such an action? Thank you for your question. Who wants to take that one on? Emily, please go ahead.
Sorry, I think I was struggling with some hand action there.
Just put your hand up. Like it's,
you know, I think I'm able to come at this from a bit of a unique perspective. I work on the North Shore for non-Indigenous in the non-Indigenous municipal setting. So for 3 municipalities on the North Shore, in kind of Metro Vancouver area. And one of the things that I'm really noticing is there's a deep desire to engage in this work. But what I'm not seeing is the authentic space for the municipalities to allow Indigenous representation to truly lead the work. And what I mean by that is there's a desire to learn, and there's the desire to want to see, want to decolonize the space, want to create cultural safety and humility, but they're trying to do it within themselves and not allow for Indigenous representation to be part of that municipal setting, whether it's honoring kind of their neighboring Indigenous partners to be working collaboratively in that space, but the spaces are still being held, and that leadership is still being held by non-Indigenous people in municipal settings, trying to lead cultural safety and humility work. And so I think it's that dialogue and discussion on how municipalities and nations work together so that we're not depleting the capacity that sits in community, because that's a very important capacity to remain in community, but how we're working in partnership to make sure that the voice of Indigenous community is meaningfully represented in leading that narrative in the municipal setting and working at a leadership level where they can affect change. And it's not a tokenistic opportunity or a disingenuous opportunity. So I think it's something that I see unfortunately happening, and I think it's something that does need to change.
Okay, miigwech, Emily, thank you. A general question: how can the COP assemblies be used more effectively as a way to bring community together, from government to NGOs, to take action locally and globally? I kind of thought that'd be a Patrick question. Go ahead.
I took a shot at COP, and I didn't mean to in a negative way. What's important is these dialogues are occurring, but what's failing is the follow-up of the implementation. And I don't care who we are, as brothers and sisters on this path, we can smell hypocrisy from a mile. When we talk about hope flows from action, after you leave an event, go out and do something. And what we find is it quickly tapers off. So for me, the COP sessions are really important because we are allowed to interact. And we see that what's brought together through COP is that the humanities brought back in. We are all experiencing a global existential crisis. So COP helps reinforce that. the importance of the climate change declarations and emergencies that are occurring at, maybe the city or municipal or regional level are also important, because it's telling people that we need to change our priorities. So I think here that the COP exercises help us understand, because climate change's impacts are so vast and so big. So COP helps us saying, okay, let's put it all down. And we can't do it all, and we can't do it all at once. So my paper says, let's focus on foundations. But there's other things. I mean, so will I ever get to a COP? Probably not. But do I follow it? Absolutely. Will I ever participate in IPCC? Probably not, but I do follow the outcomes. Why? Because I'm inspired to see so many men and women working hard on one vision, which is a vision for the next, and I'm going to say 100 years. Although I do have a video cited in my paper for the next 1,000. So yeah, I think that COP is meaningful. It brings us together, and it places us back, because COP it's not populated just by politicians and NGOs and really rich 1%ers.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm going to go on to the next question. Are there lessons that we should be sharing with approaches being taken on adaptation internationally within Australia and New Zealand? For example, in Australia, this has to be included the recognition that there is a need for a national Indigenous adaptation strategy, but also a strong recognition that it is essential to integrate Indigenous knowledge and practices into local adaptation strategies, plans, and their implementations. And just for the record, so everybody is aware, the Indigenous perspective case studies, we had them open to Canadian Indigenous communities and organizations and research groups. Who wants to take that one on?
Maybe I'll just briefly speak about that as an international Indigenous person here. I'm a settler in Canada. I'm Indigenous in my own lands. So I think it's really difficult to kind of generalize and nationalize Indigenous perspectives. I think that was part of the kind of problem to begin with. So whenever we hear word national, it just gets a little scary. There are 635 First Nations, there are Métis communities, the Inuit have very different reality. There are people with complicated stories like Sandra, which community is she from, right? There are enormous disincentives and erasure under the Indian Act that happened, that divide and further kind of disempower. So I think before any national strategy, we really need to deal with the deep colonial impacts ongoing within the governance. So it's not just another little band-aid on top. The real action is happening in communities. Like, I hope what you get out of today is that people are not talking about climate change. People are acting on climate change, right? So I think piecing it together in a national strategy, is that the right thing? I don't know. As Sherry said, there is so many layers of Indigenous organizations that are just masqueraded colonial control because they're staffed by non-Indigenous people. Non-Indigenous people are getting paid, yet people with real experience, knowledge in communities don't have some kind of certificate and will never get that job. So I think there are a lot of barriers that need to be dismantled at lower levels before we can get to any kind of national level. And I think that organizations like Cheyenne's is a space for that, where that brings together people, or Preparing a Home. As Sherry said, we're not working as politicians or, like badges. There are people working together on communities and solutions. So I think that's another really decolonial important point that we need to keep in mind.
Thank you, Lily. And I have another question. As a settler, what would be some suggested actions to take that could help encourage and/or support Indigenous knowledge and storytelling?
I could answer. Well, I could give some suggestions, I guess. So just attending and supporting events like this, or in person, building relationships with like local Indigenous people. So going to their celebrations, like June is like celebration all month for us, basically. So you'll find lots of stuff. The TRC and Orange Shirt Day event, just like starting to really yeah, find knowledge. Like our knowledge is mostly ceremonies and attending many throughout the year over years and decades, and that's how we learn, like songs, stories, all of that. So I think like powwows are a good way, any celebration you could go to. And the other thing that is important in like the anti-racism work is learning how to detect what is an authentic Indigenous story in terms of like a website or a video or a book, right? My son's class, they were using a book called Two Moons, and I immediately had a red flag. And so I looked into it. It was, the title was found from a fortune cookie, and the non-Indigenous author used it as part of their book. Like there's just a need to be aware of cultural appropriation and the anti-racism again, and like how that's why understanding the knowledge, right? The more you try and the more you take action, not just words, right? The action, the more you will understand and learn.
Great, thank you, Sandra. So our last question before we move into our closing section. Generally speaking, do you think Indigenous youth want to play a role in becoming sustainability leaders? What are some ways to get them to think about becoming scientists, engineers, consultants in this area? Are there existing programs, initiatives happening to help educate and enable them? What's the best way to get them excited and involved? It's a loaded question. Who is up for the challenge?
I think Casey. Casey is our distinguished youth worker. So now, Chef.
Go ahead, Casey.
All right, where to start? I think the biggest thing is getting the youth to be involved in a lot of things, like right from the ground up. For an example, helping through Mother Nature's wrath, to so to speak, like get them helping in volunteering in and like in my community, we deal with more flood than anything. We thankfully don't deal with fire. We get the fire smoke, but we don't get the fires themselves. So we get the youth to be involved, whether it's helping with sandbagging, helping pass message, helping getting food to all our volunteers, or just helping the elders, helping in the kitchen. So getting them interested right from the start. I believe, I think it's UBC has a science program that they sent to our community school that does their best to get our youth or any youth involved in sciencey kind of classes and courses. As well as, just looking back for the question. I can think of one thing to get them excited about it is to explain what the outcome can be and would be or might be of what the work they're going to do, what it involves, and the outcome of it. Like if you do this, then this good thing will happen or this good thing will come out of it, but not to expect it right away. If they expect it to happen like right now and it doesn't happen right now, that might shy them away from actually getting that completed and looking further into continuing on to be a sustainable leader. I hope that kind of answers the question.
Thank you, Casey. That was really great response. So this is for everyone. I just want to try one sentence. What would you tell people is the most important thing that they should be doing to advance Indigenous self-determination and good climate leadership? One sentence, and we'll start with Patrick.
Just remind each and every person that they survived contact and colonization through adaptation.
Thank you. Sherry.
It doesn't matter how big or how small we are, we all play a role, and everybody has a responsibility to protect our planet and to be doing the work that needs to be done. We need to be thinking generations ahead. We've got grandchildren, great-grandchildren, all those yet unborn that we owe this to. And if we don't do it now, there isn't going to be that opportunity. And I'm sorry, I know it was more than a sentence.
Thank you, Sherry. Go to Sandra.
I think living in a good life, mio pimadiswin, with the open-hearted, open-minded aspect of, you know, a process of always learning and always growing and always trying. So having that hope all the time.
Thank you. Emily.
I think for me, it would just be to say that sometimes these topics, conversations, or experiences seem really difficult and heavy, but to know that we can hold culture and wellness at the core of our work and hold that within ourselves, but also wrap around everybody that we do this work alongside, and just be there to help hold everybody else up in this process too.
Casey.
I would have to say, don't set your goals too low, because you can get things done right away, but then not expect the greatest outcome and just accept what happens.
Miigwech. Randy.
Hi, I did miss the question. Could you repeat it?
It was, what would you tell people is the most important thing they should be doing to advance Indigenous self-determination and good climate leadership in one sentence?
One sentence. Preparation. Yeah, like what we're trying to do here by building our emergency preparedness committee. We have over 20 members, and yeah, we got to spread the word to our community and leadership, and you know, it's never ending, so we just have to adapt.
Miigwech. And Lily.
One sentence is land back. Land needs to go back to where it belongs so it can be taken care of.
Miigwech, I thank you all for taking the time and all your energy and your passion that you put into your case studies. An appreciation, we have mailed an Indigenous gift box as a thank you to honor your work and time today. We want to thank everyone for sharing this event, and we are so thrilled with this great turnout. So miigwech, you make this possible and having to amplify the voices of our researchers. We encourage everyone to read the case studies if you haven't already at the ClimateInstitute.ca and sign up for updates, or contact us if you're interested in learning more information on how to apply yourself.